Welcome to the Manufacturing Masters Podcast with your host, Allison DeFord.
As a manufacturer, do you already have a mental health program in place to complement your physical safety and health measures and everything else that you're doing? If you don't, you're not alone, and I want to encourage you to consider doing this. Why? Because, as our guest today described to me, the head and the body are all connected. So mental is connected to physical, which is connected to overall well-being and your overall company success and culture. Today's guest is Elizabeth Eldridge, and she is not only an expert on the Manufacturing Masters platform, she is a psychological health and safety consultant. She's in New Brunswick, and she launched a company called Arpeggio Health Services in 2012. It is now the Atlantic region's largest provider of standardized mental health education programs, including mental health first aid and suicide prevention. Now, before you swipe right and decide, I don't know, is this going to be depressing? I don't know if I'm in the mood for this. This is an entirely uplifting conversation, one that I was so thrilled to have, and even more so after we were done. I learned so much, and it really got me excited about how we can more effectively help our workforce and really create a stronger culture by being more mindful of mental health. So join me today and Elizabeth Eldridge on this episode of the Manufacturing Masters Podcast. Everybody, here we grow. Hey, welcome to another episode of the Manufacturing Masters Podcast. Today, I have an incredible guest, Elizabeth Eldridge, and we're going to talk about a really important topic. We're going to talk about mental health, and we're going to talk about how manufacturers can tap into education programs and resources, which is what Elizabeth does. And Elizabeth, I have a question for you. Is this topic, do you feel like it's still very taboo, or is it becoming more front and center? People are comfortable to talk about it. What's the gist right now?
Yeah, for sure. It's that stigma is definitely something that we're breaking down, I think, as a society broadly, and then also within the workplace context. You know, we've heard lots of mental health campaigns over the last few years with a focus on let's talk, we've got to talk about it. It all starts with talking. And, you know, that really is the truth. The more that we have these conversations in our workplaces, with friends and family, you know, whoever's in our circle, the more we have those conversations in just kind of a relaxed and casual way, that really helps to break down that stigma, right? Ideally, and if we think about it from a logical perspective, you know, I often say our brain is just another organ in the body, right? So if I have a broken arm or the flu or whatever, you know, we probably think about that in the workplace environment. You know, if you were coughing or sneezing and I was worried about you, you know, let's say you and I work alongside one another every day, I probably wouldn't be thinking to myself, oh my gosh, I wonder if Allison's getting sick. Oh, I kind of want to bring it up, but I don't know what to say. I don't want her to get offended. I don't want her, you know, I would probably feel comfortable right off saying, hey, Allison, do you want me to make you a cup of tea? Here's the Kleenex box. You know, do you think you need the afternoon off? Like, what is it that you need? How can I help? So it's kind of bizarre, actually, when you think of it that way, that if it's a health issue that happens to be related to this one really specific organ, the brain, we treat it totally different. You know, everything else in the body, like we're good talking about that, right? But if it's our mental health that's involved, all of a sudden, ooh, it's really scary. It's sensitive. It's you know, it's maybe too taboo to bring up in a workplace environment even.
Right.
So yeah, we're definitely headed in the right direction, but I would say we've still got a ways to go yet. There's still work to be done.
Yeah. And, you know, I wonder, do you feel like it's taboo because in years ago, and for many, many, many years, mental was thought of as if you had a mental health issue, it was kind of like you're crazy.
Mm. Oh, totally. Oh my goodness. It's if we look at the history of mental illness and the way that mental illnesses have been treated, within the healthcare system, even, this system that is supposed to support people in regaining their wellness, it was not that long ago at all that, if you were diagnosed with a mental illness, you were stripped of your rights. You
Mhm.
were, these were not seen as health issues that a person could recover from, right? You were not seen as someone who would ever recover, who would ever become a contributing member of society again. If you were a
Right.
parent, you were seen as an unfit parent. You certainly were not seen as a fit employee. So obviously now, I mean, thankfully, we know way, way, way more about mental illness. And we understand that mental illness, even chronic mental illnesses, they are certainly health issues that are, people can and do recover from them. Absolutely. So whether it's a relatively minor problem that's kind of a bump in the road and the person goes on to, never have that type of issue again, or if it's something that is chronic and a person's taking steps to manage it, just in the way that we do with chronic physical health issues like diabetes, for example, right? Just because it's chronic, that doesn't mean a person's always going to be unwell. But when we look at how very recently the research has emerged that's helped us to see mental health and mental illness in a new lens, it does make sense that there's going to be that sort of those residual ideas, right? Of if you're labeled with a mental illness, then wow, that's not a good thing. So we know better now. And so we just need to, some of us just need to kind of catch up with that.
Right. And I love the term mental health. I myself take Prozac. I have for like 20 years. And I think it was a mix of postpartum and, changing hormones and whatnot. And I know I felt a little, I don't know, embarrassed or ashamed. It was this weird, like, wow, I need this, this pill, but it's helped so much. I can't even express it. I think it's why I'm still here today, because I had some really low lows. And
Wow.
and I think it's so important, especially after COVID. Did you see a major, well, I know there was a major rise in mental health challenges and depression and anxiety and different things. Have you seen a positive increase with let's say with manufacturers and businesses putting this front and center and really making it a priority to really help people?
It's one, if we can take one kind of positive out of a very trying chunk of time that the pandemic was. I think one good thing was that it really put mental health in the spotlight, right? So many people who had never experienced a major challenge with respect to their mental health before went through something during the pandemic that made them go, oh my gosh, this is a real thing,
Yeah.
And in the wake of all of the change, I mean, it's certainly no secret, and manufacturing is no exception, but I think across just about every industry here in Canada, and I'm hearing the same in the States as well, what the workplace looks like, what work is meaningful for people, what employees are kind of willing to do. All of that has really gone through. There's been some major adjustments there, right? So there's much more focus now on being proactive about our mental well-being. I would say gone are the days that an employer can say, well, when you clock in, check your problems at the door, you're here to work.
Right.
That's not a reasonable approach. And employees are now saying, you know what, the things that are important to me are no longer salary and benefits. There are things that are beyond just those basic things that make the difference between whether I go for that job with organization A or organization B, or stay where I am or whatever. So things like work-life balance. Those are huge, especially for younger workers, right?
Yep.
And working for an organization that has values that kind of align with an employee's own personal values, right? We're kind of evolving past the days of check your problems at the door, I think. And can I just say, Allison, too, I just want to give you a big high five. I love when people share their stories, like to that point of yours earlier, about breaking down the stigma. That's what it's all about. It's kind of funny that there is still stigma around things like taking medication because, oh my goodness, if you look at the statistics, I mean, more than half of us are, right? And as I like to say, probably the other half are close to it, maybe should be, right? So, it's like, to use that mental health, physical health comparison again. Imagine if I had a broken leg, being embarrassed or feeling ashamed that I have a cast on, right? I mean, everybody knows, like, that's what you're doing to get well. So, there's sometimes this double-edged sword of stigma where, like, try and figure this one out. There's stigma associated with struggling with your mental health, but then there's also stigma associated with taking the steps to get better, right? So it puts people in such an impossible position. And, it takes a lot to go to a healthcare provider and say, I do not feel like myself, it's big and scary, and it takes a lot of courage to do it. But almost universally, though, people will say, oh my goodness, why didn't I do this sooner? I'm so glad I took this step. And but I just wanted to commend you for that. That's
well, thank
so
you.
cool.
Well, I think it does take some level of courage, and I kind of feel like it really does too for manufacturing leaders or owners, or to, get over any stigmas or biases that you may have when it comes to mental health, in an effort to wholeheartedly support your team and your employees. And really, I think it takes empathy. You may not understand what they're going through, but by God, if you see or suspect, right, something is going on, and then also taking measures, which I think I'd love for you to share more about, instilling a program ahead of time to really help nurture people's mental and physical well-being. I think we're seeing the importance, right? It's like years and years ago, like you said, you showed up for work, you worked your tail off. Leisure time was not really important. Taking care of self was not really important. And especially women, right? The major childcare providers. And, I think we tend to feel guilty for taking care of ourselves sometimes. I think we're getting over that. I know I am, but I see the difference, right? It's like, if you're good, everyone around you is better. So I don't want to ramble on. I want to go back to what I just asked about. Can you share maybe some problems that are unique to manufacturers or manufacturing, that can be solved? I had this question for you. Solved by making psychological health and safety a priority. Like, are there any particular problems unique to manufacturing, and what kinds of things can employers do and put in place to, make this a priority and to really help people be proactive?
So I love what you said about empathy, because it really does start there. One of my very favorite, I don't know if you have read any of Brene Brown's works on yeah, you're a Brene gal. Okay. Love it. So I love the way that she words things. And one thing that she has said that has always stuck in my mind, she talks about empathy being a recognizing a person's perspective as their truth, right?
Yes.
So yeah, it's so bang on, right?
Yep.
So I sometimes hear leaders say, well, yeah, but what this employee is saying, it doesn't make sense and it doesn't make, well, it's not, it's
It makes
not
sense for them.
Exactly. It's with what that person is going through, the tools that that person has access to in their very unique individual toolkit at that time. That is where that person is at, right? So as a leader, if I'm going to be a support for this employee who is struggling, that's kind of step one, right? I need to, rather than casting judgment on what this person is citing as the problem, because our minds so often go to, well, if I were in that person's shoes, I wouldn't see it this way, or I would do it that way, or why don't they just do this or that? And I always say, if it was a problem with an easy solution, the person probably already would have done it, right? So,
Exactly.
on the outside looking in, we know it's easy for us to solve somebody else's problems, but we've probably all been in a place before where somebody on the outside is giving us what they see as good advice, right? And in our minds, we're going, well, there's more to it than that. So I think one of the places where we can start, like we talked about a few minutes ago, just having these conversations and putting mental health not just as a line item on a checklist, right? Because speaking frankly, that is something that I sometimes see. An organization will say, well, our leadership team met and we discussed what we want to make a priority for the new fiscal year. We're going to hit such and such for productivity or for a production marker or whatever. We're going to, do this and this. We're going to address mental health. We're going to do that. We're going to do, well, addressing mental health, like that's pretty huge, right? So what I always recommend to my consulting clients is think of psychological health and safety as the same as the way that we've traditionally looked at physical health and safety on the job, right? It's psychological health and safety falls under the occupational health and safety umbrella. If we're only talking about slip and fall prevention and WMIS and all of that stuff, we're missing a big piece of it because we know our minds and bodies are linked, right? So we can really, So, even just take a simple example in a manufacturing environment. If you have somebody working on a machine who, let's say I'm a shift worker, right? Which we know there's, this will surprise no one, I'm sure, but there's been lots of research done on the impact to our mental health of shift work, right? So not even just those kind of bizarre sleep schedules, but also it can often cause disruption or disconnection within the family unit and, all sorts of kind of domino effects that we see as a result. So let's say I've got something going on at home. I'm struggling in my marriage or spousal relationship. So I'm distracted and I'm working with this piece of machinery, right? So right off the bat, from a risk mitigation perspective, if I'm distracted and working with, even if it's a piece of equipment that I'm used to and I work with it every day, just something small like being stressed out and my mind is somewhere else, that ups the risk of a physical accident being happening that day, right? Now imagine, heaven forbid, an accident does happen. Everybody who is on shift with me, everybody who witnessed that accident, everybody, like if you think of the impact of that traumatic event within that work environment, right? And you can just see the ripple kind of grow. So like I say, if we are talking about occupational health and safety and leaving the mental health piece out of the equation, we end up missing a really big piece of it. Another thing that I see that's kind of unique, I would say, to manufacturing environments, lots of times, especially with entry-level positions, it's a lot of repetitive work, right? And so we know that something that really fuels engagement is when a person genuinely derives meaning from the work that they're doing. So if I bring it, the ideal situation is that we onboard a new employee and they learn the job, they're a great fit for the company, they're well respected by peers and leadership, and they move up in the ranks and we know now that most manufacturers in the country are really struggling with turnover rates. And we know the huge amount of resources that go into hiring someone, that whole onboarding process, the training process. Then let's say they're there for 3 weeks and they leave and we have to repost the job and a huge cost, right, for organizations. So how do we keep that entry-level employee engaged when realistically the work that they are hired to do in that entry-level position might be something like, on an assembly line, for example, right? I'm seeing more and more organizations now focus a lot more in the onboarding process on cultural fit than just skills-based hiring, right? So the idea is, if this person is a good fit with our organizational culture, if this person says, let's say this, I'm hired to work at a factory, and this factory is one of their core values is on green production. They're actively working to reduce their emissions, and they're contributing to causes that support, greener production, and maybe they give employees volunteer opportunities to do something. So if that's something that's really an important value to me as a human being, even though the work that I'm actually doing when I'm on shift might not be super fulfilling in that moment, it can really go a long way to help me see a future with the organization, right? So then, easier said than done, because of course there are a lot of other pieces too, where ideally there's going to be a leader who mentors me and helps me to carve out a career path within the organization that helped, there are lots of different steps that we could put in place to help further support me in, sticking with that organization. But the culture piece absolutely is huge.
That is so important. So to recap what you just said, because I like to make sure I'm understanding and that our audience is understanding too, I feel like it's definitely empathy and listening before fixing. Right?
Beautifully put.
Understand first. Just hear what the person is saying and don't try to fix or solve or judge. I think there's a lot of judgment when we're trying to fix, well, can't you just? Well, couldn't you just, take an extra break, or couldn't you just go to counseling with your wife, or whatever it is? So it sounds like that's incredibly important for leaders. And then two, when you're hiring, you said, think about cultural fit, not just skills, right? Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And, if I often use my sister as an example of this. So she's, my youngest sister is about 10 years younger than I am. She's an environmental scientist. She works for an engineering firm, and she would be like the poster person for hiring for organizational fit. I'm telling you, as far as recruitment, she is probably one of the biggest assets that company has, because she tells everybody who will listen to her for 2 minutes how the company she works for is they are the best at what they do. They are the best to work for. They genuinely care about their employees. There's so much discussion right now about recruitment and retention. If we're doing a good job with hiring for cultural fit, and this organization is like, they really are a dream team. This company and her as a human being, it's a match made in heaven. So they did a really great job in empowering her. And now, the reach that she has. So for her company, it's not just falling on a couple individuals to recruit, to say, hey, our company's great, come work for us. They have, and I know she's not unique at her company too. She has a lot of coworkers who are telling their circles, hey, this is a great company to work for. Come and work for us. This is what sets the organization apart. So for an organization that is hiring someone who is a good fit, that is someone who can really be taught to do anything. It's True. Something that, it's because her, what she's doing for work, she finds it so rewarding and so satisfying. but a lot of it is actually new to her. She finished her master's a couple of years ago, and when she started with this organization, they gave her a lot of development opportunities. And she is so in love with the company that, she just, if they believe she can do something, she believes she can do it. And she's really, really motivated to learn it. Right.
So empowering. So she's become a brand ambassador.
That's exactly it. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. She loves throwing stuff out there on LinkedIn about, now everybody's going to be Googling my sister's name, right? And see who she works for. But it's just so she just turned 30, and she would be kind of, when I talk about the younger generations and what we're seeing, research is telling us that priorities for millennials and Gen Z, they're vastly different than what met the needs of the boomer generation, right? And even my generation. So she is like textbook definition on all fronts. So she gives me, I should probably be giving her some sort of she serves as an example for me in almost every talk that I give. So
I love it. Well, I was so sad when we get towards the end of an episode, because there's so much. I want to know, I want our listeners to know what does your work look like? What does it look like if somebody hired someone like you, a consultant, to come in and work with them?
Yeah, so I do kind of a mixed bag of tricks. A lot of my job is around assessing organizational needs first. So we kind of identify gaps. Oftentimes a client will come to me saying, here's the gap that we've identified. But, because there are so many different links kind of to mental health, sometimes if we dig a little bit deeper, we identify, this area kind of needs to be addressed before we can address that area. And then I work with companies to put in place best practice guidelines, which we have now. There's a document called the National Standard on Psychological Health and Safety in the Workplace. So that's a CSA document. Manufacturers all, I'm sure, know about CSA. If you're wearing steel-toed boots right now, they're CSA approved. So this is a document that came out about 10 years ago and tremendously helpful. It's kind of the guiding light for being proactive and addressing psychological health at work. I do a lot around policy development, culture change strategies. A huge part of my job is training. So in the same way as, what we talked about with my sister, how she's a bit of a brand ambassador for her company. When we think about the way that we approach and address mental health at work, I have said 1,000 times, I was going to say in my career, probably 1,000 times this month alone, that mental health should not just fall to HR, right? I hear lots of times when I show up at the office of a new client, they'll say, oh, mental health, HR is, second door on the left. And if we are doing a really good job of integrating this stuff within our culture, it cannot be an assigned task to just, one department or one or two individuals. So through training, that's where we really help to break down some of those barriers and to coach anyone from an entry-level position all the way up to a leadership role, or, anyone and everyone in the workplace should have basic knowledge and skills around navigating a conversation about mental health. So
I love that. Yeah.
You don't have to be a mental health professional to have these conversations. Like, we're not diagnosing someone or anything like that. But, like we talked about, the empathy piece, the listening piece, we're not there to fix things or solve the problems. We just need to be comfortable saying to a person, hey, I noticed XYZ, you were a little quiet this morning in that meeting. What's going on? Is there anything that you need? And if we're knowledgeable about the resources that we have access to within our workplaces, like employee assistance program, health benefits, anything like that, when we have that information and we can kind of, I often describe it as our role is kind of like knowledge translator. So, you've got that little blue card that has the employee assistance program information on it, and maybe it came with your orientation package, and maybe you haven't looked at it since the day that you came on board, right? So if someone can say to you, hey, listen, this is the phone number. Here's what happens when you call, or if you go to the website, you log in, and in the top right-hand corner, there's this and that. So if you can really break it down for a person so that they feel like that information is, a little bit more accessible, and you serve as the bridge, right, to help them access the help that they need. That can be huge because, simply put, this mental health stuff, if it is falling to just one person, then it's not getting done. Like, talk to an HR person. They have pretty busy jobs. They have other things assigned to them other than just this one thing, but most HR folks would tell you that they have, all day long, there's somebody knocking on their door saying, hey, someone on my team is, going through XYZ, or what do you think I should say to this person? Or someone came to me with that problem. What do you think I should say? So if we give people the tools that they need to navigate those conversations, it's, obviously there's practical benefit, but it's also really great for kind of that team cohesion, right? So that person who's struggling doesn't feel like their leader is saying, I don't know, go talk to HR about it.
Right. Well, I just love that. I always find segues to things in my brain, or like connections, but I've talked for years, and some of many of my colleagues are as well, how, marketing is not a separate silo from sales. They should be connected. They should also be connected to operations. I think you bring up a beautiful point that mental health is as important and should be connected to physical health and safety, to HR, to every department, just like we were talking earlier, how the brain is connected to the mental, is connected to the physical.
Yeah.
If we can start seeing it that way in our businesses, that all of these departments, if you will, these tools and resources, they're all connected. So if we could just look at it that way, these are just some more tools in your toolbox that are going to help you be a more well-rounded leader, business owner, friend, partner, worker, fill in the blank.
Yeah, absolutely. And, when people feel supported, they're naturally going to be more engaged. They're going to be more loyal to the company. They're going to be happier at work. When we're happy and healthy, of course, we put out our best work, right? So, there's tons of research showing the return on investment for employers. But I think also just from a human place, I guess, right? It makes sense. Like, don't we all want to go and work at a place where we feel like, hey, that felt good. That was satisfying. I had a laugh today with a coworker. My leader really believes in me. And, if we can put ourselves in the shoes of, a person who's maybe going through something tough, and think about approaching that person just as a human being who cares, of course, that's going to be a positive thing for everybody involved.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's, to me, this whole thing boils down to everybody wants to matter. And so when you feel like you matter at your workplace, it's going to affect really every part of your life. So I just want to thank you for spending time with me today. I want to tell you what the work you're doing matters. So thank you. Thank you.
So kind of you, Allison. That really means a lot to me. Thank you.
No, it really does. I tell people I have a self-proclaimed PhD in self-help. And so I'm constantly learning and absorbing tools and resources and, ways that I can not only help myself, but help others. So thanks for spending time today. And if, everybody listening, if you're not already connected with Elizabeth Eldridge on LinkedIn, for example, please go do that. You will not regret it. And if you have any questions for her, please reach out to her. You could DM her on LinkedIn. And I would just say thank you to everybody who's listening right now or watching this today for spending some time with us. And I want to let you know that if nobody else tells you this week, you matter. And the work that you do is very important. And we're excited about it. And we're excited that you're here. So, hey, keep tuning in. And we appreciate you. And thank you for being here today.
Thanks so much, Allison. It's been fun.
All right, until next time, everybody.
If you're not already, subscribe to the Manufacturing Masters podcast on Apple Music or Spotify. And for a deeper dive, head on over to manufacturing-masters.com. It's everything they never taught you in school.